Welcome to the Myofascial Magic in Action podcast. My name's Joanne and Avison, and here is my colleague, Paul Thornley. Hi, Paul.
Well, hello there, Joanne. How the devil are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Not bad. Not bad at all. Inclement weather, a few missiles flying overhead, keeping the head down, and then just embracing each day as it comes. All good.
Well, for everybody today, welcome to the podcast. And for our audio listeners, this episode is going to include some video clips from our training program. This is number 2 in our series. Last time we did Rebound. This time we're doing Recoil. So if you'd like to see what we're referring to, please head over to YouTube and you can watch the full episode there. So this episode is all about why mechanical thinking actually breaks movement down in a way that doesn't actually make sense of how the human body actually expresses itself. And what we're showing you here is a taste of what replaces that mechanical thinking. And the myth that we're really busting in this episode is that the body works like a system of levers that we can optimize. And I think you've probably heard me and Paul say many, many, many times, there are no levers in nonlinear biologic forms. But today, what we're going to do is open up this question. Well, hang on a second. If there are no levers, what are we actually working with? Now, what we're going to talk about today is that really most training programs are based on what position should you be in and the mechanics of that position. What works in controlled environments, such as a Pilates studio or a yoga studio or a gym, for example, where there's absolutely specific machinery or equipment that you use in a way that the body complies to the mechanics, if that makes sense. That actually fails in real movement. So we're going to look at one of the first things that we do in Recoil. And one of the main key things that we as human beings take for granted and no longer do that well, I think, because we spend so much time sitting and we've kind of forgotten the natural expression of walking is walking, right? It's an absolute keystone of everything and it's the foundation of Recoil. What would you say about that? I know we've talked about this in previous episodes about different animals and the way they walk. We all have a movement signature, but there are some real keystones in Recoil to natural human gait.
Well, it's an invitation to return to our natural speciality as a human being is to walk upright and vertical on and over any terrain we desire to adventure through. And we've taken that away as we become more domesticated. And the more domesticated we become because of the more conveniences that are at our disposal, we tend to walk less and less. And are not really aware of the inconvenience that lack of utilization of our natural mobility provides us. We don't really recognize until we're facing the fact that we've lost their ability to walk. And then it becomes a serious problem and an issue we then have to address. And so what often happens, people base their exercise regimes or their healthcare and their fitness status in these situations which are very organized, and instructors position them in a certain way, like they're following a copy and paste approach, and they follow the protocol from A to B and then from B to C, and they get progression by how heavy they lift, how much they can pull, or how long they can do a particular activity. And none of that exists in the real world because the real world is much more unpredictable. And it's in the round more often than it is ever in linearity. And what we see and why we are chronic pain specialists is most people come to us because they've become victims of overutilization of linearity by believing that their body is a series of levers that push and pull in straight lines. And when you reawaken them and reintroduce these rotational patterns to them and these counter-rotating relationships within the body, all of a sudden movement also becomes much more unrestricted. And there's a lot more freedom, a lot more athleticism available to them. So what most instructors are doing is making people conform to their version of the mechanical education they received. And what we would like them to see is the unique individualism of each person that comes to them and invite unpredictability to their movement experience, which they then have to self-organize and self-manage in that given moment in the present.
So one of the things that we see in this first clip is where, rather than having somebody kneel down in what we might call a stable position where their legs are acting as props to support them, we deliberately disorganize that to bring on instability, as we've got Helen here looking so beautiful, and kneeling as a preparation for the next piece. So what are we actually seeing here? What most practitioners try to control in this is balance, and what you are allowing and prompting almost is wobbling.
Well, they're taking away the ability to fall. That they're removing that as a risk. Most instructors will remove the risk of falling by having a wider, much more stronger, confident base of support in width of foundation. But that is no reflection of how you entered the studio, or you're going to leave it. You'll leave on one leg at a time as you transition to walk yourself to your next appointment or next activity of your day. So what we want to do is invite instability, which we should become experts at managing, rather than rely on such extreme senses of stability and stabilization of our body, which ultimately restricts movement rather than enhances relationships of movement to all others. So you'll notice in that clip, what we're seeing is we've on purpose created a self-constraint to width by bringing her as narrow as we can. Now, of course, everybody's different and everybody has a different ability to manage that restriction. I mean, you might need to borrow and negotiate with the floor for your start position. But it's very important that you start as narrow as you can and as close as you can to the heel and the knee that are on the ground, almost like you're walking on a tightrope, to stimulate that natural organization of your body's innate ability to recognize being unstable, but being more than capable of responding accordingly. So it can make sure it can recover and balance and react and adjust to anything that then comes in its way. And that's the idea. It's just an invitation to move better and be more aware of how you go about your sequencing.
Yeah, and I think a classical practitioner mistake in this is must get the foot wide of the other knee so that it balances the body, when actually what we want to do here is bring that deep internal ability to manage our natural recoil integrated with the ground. And it's not an abstract theory when we're working with it in MMIA. We're doing lots and lots of different things that completely prompt and develop that ability to be self-reliant and self-organizing, so that if you are walking along and a pavement has got a crack in it, you are able to manage that almost instantly.
But it shouldn't take you by surprise, because the floor should be undulating and unpredictably unstable, because the nature of the road is that it should move with you. Like the ground should be of a softer or harder terrain. It might be not as even as you might expect it to be, depending on where you go. We've all got so domesticated and reliant on things being perfect and flat and manageable and predictable. And what you see Helen here do is, again, most instructors would be looking for symmetry, shoulders at the same height, pelvis at the same height, head in the center, the arms lift to exactly the same angles. And that's robotics. That is not human organic movement at all. And what we're encouraging people to embrace is their unique asymmetry. The fact that they are weirdly, uniquely perfect. That we do have weird positions of each shoulder, and one is more forward or back of the other. And every variation you can manage it and conjure up in your imagination, people will present in front of you. But it's their job to organize themselves in a particular situation we've invited them to test themselves out in. And as you'll see here, as Helen's moving through, and all we've asked her to do is organize this initial position and then make it wobbly by raising and descending the heel. So we call it plantar flexion and dorsiflexion of the foot, but she's basically raising the heel up and lowering it back down on that tightrope configuration. And notice how her knee wants to veer off to the side. It wants to go wide because that's what she's familiar doing when she feels unstable. But because we've made her keep the constraint and we've invited her a self-imposed restriction, she has to respond differently. And this is what gives the body a different sense of timing, a different sense of confidence and rhythmic response rather than aggressive reaction. We don't want her stiffening to defend the wobbliness. I want her to embrace and envelop herself within the wobbliness, within the instability, so that movement it can go in any direction, and she's more than capable of managing not falling or accepting she is going to go to the ground, and she'll recover just fine.
It's so brilliant. And we go on with the next clip. I love this one, where you literally amplify the whole thing by introducing the chirality, the counter-chirality, the spiraling of the body. Still on the ground, still in this position, but we develop it into sort of spiral balance. So we're focusing a little bit on variation, because that's the name of the game out there, right? It's unpredictability. It's individual, the way Helen works and her lovely long body, very tall and slim. So it's a particular way of managing her own architecture.
Yeah.
And it's just, you go into super amplification, don't you, when you bring the counter rotation of the shoulders?
Well, it's exactly that. You're exaggerating a very simple motion of walking, but instead of doing it in a very vertical upright position on the soles of your feet with your legs straight, which then you have to manage and account for so much variation in the relationship of the floor through all of the segmental areas of your body to the crown of your head. And there's a lot to be thinking about. And when you're trying to invite change or an awareness of this asymmetry that I want them to like marry into, they don't want to divorce themselves from, and it must be perfect. We want them to really embrace the fact that things are uniquely organized within themselves. Going down to the ground on the knees gives them a fair chance of recognition of that variation within them. And it allows them to explore what is possible, what is capable, and what is not. And then what you then do, you amplify the walking. So, of course, like you see the military, they all teach you how to walk as a civilian and then turn you into a body of men in the military. That includes, of course, women. And that's where they exaggerate how the arms swing forward and back. And it goes from behind you and then level with your shoulder in front. And you encourage rotation of the torso. And it's amazing to see the process and be part of the process. I've done it myself, where you go from just strutting your stuff and strolling around with your hands in your pockets to really having a very dynamic motion that creates synergy with other people. So regardless of the individual variation we all have, you can still synchronize with the body of other people, like-minded individuals walking well. And then you arrive efficiently together, and then you can carry on with your tasks. So we invite that here. We exaggerate it because, of course, nobody walks down the road with it like a march. Only soldiers, right? On parade, on ceremonial duties. But if you do and you embrace the fact that this is a possibility, it reveals the truth about your bony configuration. It reveals the truth about your myofascial relationships within the softer fabric that we are. It reveals the truth about your neurological stimulus that creates that chemical response to moving freely. It reveals everything. And you don't have to know any of the science. You just know that you can swing your arms and you can counter-rotate your torso between a very stabilized foundation of this position of the feet and knees and pelvis in this nice tightrope configuration, and the head remaining central. So you're looking where you might fictitiously travel. And now you get this thing, you naturally unlock this chirality of relationships within, which means spirals of counter-rotation. The very same way you lift a lid off a bottle, you turn the lid in one direction and the bottle the other, and they create space. And that space in the human body creates dynamic tensioning of the ligamentous tissues that creates integrity of shape, so it can change shape and reform as it travels along, just like this counter-rotating my hands are doing. So the arms animate that natural process in the body. And it's such a fabulous way to feel it, because often we don't. We tend to swing our arms sideways across us if we do any sense of athleticism. And this creates a sideways, this lateral sway, which in this position, she would definitely fall over. There would be no motion forward. It would be sideways like a crab. But we want to be vibrant like a human, where we can go forward and back and up and down and pivot and change direction should we choose to, in the narrowest organization we can form. And now our capabilities and skill set are raised, and our standard of quality and awareness of this opportunity will also raise with us. And now anything is possible, but you have to first introduce it to see where you lie, where the ground lies first.
I think that one of the things that's most important about this, most training teaches you what you should look like in the movement. And one of the things I love about this is it's very much about what you should feel like, right?
Yes.
And I think that where most people go wrong here, they try to correct the shape instead of reading what's happening through the body. So what you've just explained, that dynamic, say spatialization, it's not space like empty space.
No.
It's allowing the body to spiral up and spiral down with the breath.
Yes.
And I think that a lot of people think that strength will drive this, and why strong people can still move poorly, because strength doesn't organize movement. I think what we're doing here really is that you can't rely on a particular position. You actually have to read the force transmission. Would you say that?
Well, listen, strength is relative to the activity at hand, yes? So sometimes you need big strength, you need big power, you need athleticism. If you have to push something in an emergency or you want to get something done, yes, sometimes shape and form and precision go out of the window. You just do it. And that you should be capable of doing those sort of movements. But that's also the case is we don't want strength to be our only option. We don't want to
Yeah.
only have brute force to do anything repetitively. Sometimes instead of bursting through a door, you can just use the handle and push and open the flipping door. So you can have, there's often a lot more subtlety in quality of movement that gives you the longevity of options and choices to apply a more vigorous, aggressive, forceful approach when necessary. But movement shouldn't be so aggressive so often because the very nature of this soft tissue, it should have the ability and vibrancy to perform for as long as we live and recover through the process of performing. It
And
should recover and resynthesize so it retains its quality for as often as we can. And yes, we do need an element of force to stimulate that within the muscular element, but we don't want that muscular dominance to overwhelm the architectural fabric that allows that muscle to exist at all. And that's what it's learning first. And those virtual spaces we talk about them a lot. If you lose them, like you see in an X-ray, if those spaces are reduced, yes, in their
yeah,
appropriate relationship to each other, and they become disappeared completely, then movement and shape change at that segmental area is taken away from you, and life becomes incredibly difficult. And which is why a lot of people find walking later on in life really challenging because they didn't sustain and retain that virtual space throughout their life. They wore it away through excessive linearity of movement and took away the vibrancy of the bounce and the recoiling nature of tissue through these counter-rotating motions to retain those virtual spaces for as long as possible over the duration of their life.
this is just so key, and it's one of the things I absolutely love about the work in Myofascial Magic in action, because you can't see this unless you've trained your perception. But once you've seen it, right, you can't not see it.
Exactly.
And there's such very specific and relatively, I won't say simplistic, but they are not complex. There's a simplifying to our core structural power, really, isn't it? So that it never looks the same twice, right? The work that we do, the position doesn't dominate it. The expression and the ability to
Well, it's
rotate.
like in the ocean, right? You don't get two of the same waves. It's the same ocean, and the waves are always crashing in, and the sea is always retreating, and it crashes back in.
Yeah.
But each wave is unique. Each snowflake is unique. Each cell in all of our unique bodies is unique. So our expression of movement of all of those elements is unique to each opportunity we take to move ourselves. But the quality should be similar. That's the unifying expression of movement is, am I doing it because I can, or am I doing it because I understand why I'm doing it? Because just because you can do something doesn't mean you perhaps should do it so often. And it's understanding the consequences and preparing for them, and then it's good. Like if you like doing hard, forceful stuff in linearity, please enjoy yourself. But know there's a consequence to that linearity and bias to straight lines of motion, whether it's in push, pull, lift, or lower. And you're not allowing the roundness of yourself to be the preeminating movement direction. Like roundness and spiraling should be incorporated in every movement we do, particularly when we use the arms
Absolutely.
and the legs, which we only see as levers generally, because that's how we're guided and how we guide others generally based on our anatomical education. But education has changed, our knowledge has changed, and our application of that knowledge is now light years away from our historical past. And we know, as
Absolutely.
working in the field of helping people do rehabilitation, and more latterly trying to avoid rehabilitation at all by teaching people how to not get hurt in the first instance, that the key movement that we tend to all lack in the same quantities as we do in the gym or the Pilates or yoga studio is spiraling and turning. And if we can bring that to the forefront and make that our primary motion during all motions, we would undo an awful lot of the issues that we are unwelcoming into our lives.
I couldn't agree more. And one of the things in yoga, I know we do a lot of twists. They're called twists, or we don't use the word rotation so much, but they're very strong twists. They're twisting the knees away from the shoulders. They're big movements, twisting into intricate folds of the body.
Yeah.
And what I love about this last clip that we've got here is so important, because you bring in the arms and the having done the work with the legs, we bring in the arms, but with this huge grace, but you're still honoring how the entire torso is spiraling and counter spiraling, but doing it in this subtle way. And I know in some environments it would be considered a bit lightweight, these micro movements, what are they for? But the difference this makes to someone's gait is absolutely phenomenal, right?
Well, it's like that lightweight approach, or it's almost a disrespectful recognition of the value of these micro movements, isn't it? To the grosser outcome of macro effort. And if you liken it to motor racing, people want to drive fast as they can. They want to do the most extreme capabilities and tolerances on the track and achieve great speeds and reach great accolades in the big moment. But that's only possible because there's a team of people in the garage for hours refining and fine-tuning in the tiniest way every element of that high performance car.
Absolutely.
Well,
and the combination,
of all
those elements.
So we are doing exactly the same in the human body, but not from a mechanical perspective, but from a biological one. And we recognize that everything in the body is of a round nature. And if you take it away, then you incorporate too much shearing. Not that shearing doesn't occur in the body. Of course it does. Because whenever you have fabrics going towards each other, there's likely to be shearing elements to it. But you don't want to invite them so frequently that motion dominates how that tissue has to exist within you. We want to limit those shearing opportunities and make sure that we keep the environmental in a gliding nature, so the consistency of the tissue glides. And how we do that is by incorporating spirals and rotations within the skeletal system, which enhances the myofascial rhythm between the skeletal elements. So this rotation and the use of the band that Helen Lucy is doing, and she has extreme range because her preference is yoga. She can do really big bends and folds and take her body into the most contorted shapes, which is fabulous. It's a great party piece. But then she becomes victim of that capacity and capability. Yeah. So what this does, it adds a self-constraint where she now has to focus on the quality of limitation of rotation, which optimizes the position of the bony arrangement of the arm within the thoracic cavity that it grew from, so that she doesn't become a victim of excessive range and capabilities. She becomes the hero, recognizing the boundaries. And those boundaries create natural recoiling characteristics and behaviors, which means she can then continue to do her extreme folds as she wishes, but manage the consequences of them by restoring and optimizing where things should live on a day-to-day basis within her.
And then she retains her spring ability. And I talked with her last weekend, and it was just fabulous. We were both bouncing around. So it was just brilliant, and it works.
Yeah.
And I love that, because what you're basically saying is we can do our strength work, we can do our length work, if we want to call it that. I can't bear those terms, but there we go. And yet we can actually maintain the optimum spring that we were designed for, right? It's our human blueprint.
We should do the very things we like doing the most. I don't like people saying we can't do this. I want people to know why they're doing it. So if you like strength work, do strength training. Strength training is very important as a human being, to have muscle mass, to have lean muscle quality, to have the ability to create movement efficiently and powerfully. That's important, but not at the expense of our form and our ability to do it often. So we don't want to throw all our eggs in one basket. We want to have many baskets where we are encouraging ranges and distances and reaching and pulling, as well as every element on the spectrum. So we have all the components that allow us to have the most healthy, vibrant lifestyle we choose to have. But it's just recognizing the consequences of losing any of the spring in any of the areas within your body, because the wholeness of it suffers if you lose spring in any element through it. So like if you don't have it, like we spoke about in that first segment about rebounding, if you can't rebound through your ankle and your calf, your whole body will become victim to that lack of spring in your step. In this instance, we showed the spring in her shoulders and through her thoracic. If she doesn't have that springing capacity through that natural fabric of the arm through the thoracic, she'll find lifting and tolerating forces through her arms very difficult. And then she'll avoid them. And that then is a domino effect to dysfunction. So restoring spring throughout your tissue, throughout the wholeness of your body is the main aim of the game. And these first 2 episodes of Rebound and Recoil, they should blend and become one episode within our daily activities.
And then we sneak up towards release, meaning releasing a suboptimal pattern. So we'll talk about that next time.
Indeed we will.
Thanks, Paul. Absolutely. I love working with you. And thanks for all of that.
My pleasure.